Welcome to the All Together Show with Eric Satz. On this show, you'll hear Eric's unfiltered interviews with interesting and untraditional entrepreneurs who ignored boundaries, followed their instincts and own paths, and are now empowering others to do the same. Subscribe to the show and learn more by visiting alltogether.show. And now, your host, Eric Satz.
Season 1 of the All Together Show has been all about entrepreneurs and early stage investors. And this week's guest is no exception to that rule. Scott Kitun has been promoting investment and investor inclusion and crowdfunding before crowdfunding was even a thing. He's the co-founder of Technori, a media entertainment platform with a mission to help founders more easily raise startup funds by building a community around tech and investing. So Scott's an entrepreneur, he's a podcast host, and he's an angel investor. I think you're really going to enjoy this show. Take a listen.
This episode of the All Together Show is brought to you by Alto IRA. Alto is a digital, self-directed IRA company modernizing IRA investing. They make it easy and cost-effective for individual investors to access their retirement savings and invest in alternative assets. To learn more, visit altoira.com.
Scott Kitun, welcome to the All Together Show, buddy. I feel like we just did this, last week on your playground.
We did. We just we reversed it here. It's a little different. I always love being in the hot seat because I rarely, as I said to you on my show, I'd never get the opportunity to go on like that many pods. It's fun to be on the other side.
Well, we're doing the home and away. And, for like the one person out there who doesn't know who Scott is, media entrepreneur, investor, founder and CEO of Technori, which is all kind of interesting from a professional background standpoint. But really what I want to know, what listeners want to know is when you think about who you are, who is Scott Kitun?
Man, that's a Talkspace interview right there.
I'll be quiet and listen.
No, it's so funny that you phrased it to start this way because I was literally just talking about this with my producer Sam today. It was like, what is your title and what do you want people to think of you? And when they read it, what do they want? What do you want them to ask you about you? And so I'll tell you, like from the beginning of time as an entrepreneur, I would give you this whole bullshit line of, I've done this, I've sold this, I've raised this. And now if you ask me that question, who am I? I would say I'm Jen's husband. I'm Vivi's father. I'm Boo-Ray's little puppy daddy sitting over here in the corner. And I hope to be a resource for people out there that want to be entrepreneurs and want to make a living not sitting in a fucking cubicle and that don't have to go through what I went through, which was my family upbringing was great. My parents, made decent money, but not enough money to give me millions to start. And I went out and started begging for money like everybody else. And, I quote this all the time, so I'll just use it here too. Howard Tolman, former CEO of 1871, far more well-known than me. I pitched him on the podcast Technori idea and he said it was a stupid fucking idea. That's what he said. And he came 3 years later on our stage and told everyone that he said that and regretted it. So I went on and had to take out a credit card round and max my shit out to $65,000 to get a start because no one would say yes. And I don't want other entrepreneurs to have to do that. So I'm a guy who has a family life and lives a nice life at home and try to figure out how to make a buck without busting my ass too hard.
So, by the way, I don't believe that. I think you bust your ass.
I guess I should say without busting my ass for other people, not making everyone else rich while I have to just slave away.
Fair enough. So there's a lot to unpack in that in that first statement. And also, people who listen to the show know that I sent a questionnaire to the guests in advance. I have to say there are a ton of firsts on the answer sheet here, which I just absolutely love. So we're going to start with, where were you born? And you're the first person to actually list the hospital. Why did you list the hospital?
So the funny part is I almost wrote DuPage Hospital. Now, actually, I almost wrote CDH, Central DuPage Hospital, formerly known as DuPage Hospital. I want to be real specific. You asked the question. I think people ask all the time, where are you from? And everyone goes, oh, Chicago. And it's like, I'm not from fucking Chicago. I work in Chicago and I'm familiar with the city, but I'm not born in Chicago. I don't have the accent talking about sausages and I'm not that guy. So when you ask that question, I see people with that all the time. Like, where are you from? It's like, fucking hospital, man. I was born in a DuPage hospital. My parents took me home to Glen Ellen. I was raised here. I left to go to school in Milwaukee. I left to live in Evanston for a minute. I went downtown for a minute. I'm back here now. That's where I'm from.
You're an only child.
Yeah.
Like you showed up at the hospital and your parents were like, oh my God, our hands are full.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was a disappointment from the start. My mom wanted it to be a girl named Ashley and it was a boy and she didn't have the name per se. So she named me Scott after a soap opera character, Scotty Baldwin, who I guess she thought was a stunner. And so that's how I got my name. And I think, my parents probably were like, this is different. It's funny. The only child thing, like my wife talks about, she has one of two and there's an only child syndrome. And I think I might have some tendencies of it because I don't have a sister or brother to like sit around and talk to, but I don't think I'm like raised like an only child. Like my parents and we were just different. And there's a lot of that that goes into like kind of the story of how I got to this point and what I do. But I don't think I'm like a lot of the only child syndromes that are out there. I don't think I have. I see.
Well, the Altogether show is about you. One of the core values at Alto is you do you. So tell us how you got to this point. Let's just go there right now.
Yeah.
Tell me about your childhood and how you ended up here.
So it's interesting. I was raised in a house with a pretty open, my mom grew up, on a farm and they had an open door policy. Anyone in town that could use help, could need help, they could eat there, they could stop there. She was one of 12 kids, like craziness. And my dad was a national sales director for a company. And so he traveled like 50 weeks a year. And so we sort of had this like community upbringing. Like it would be me hanging out with my mom and they're like, oh, we're going to get a new car. And I would have a say in it. And like, they would walk me through the finances. I would like sit down at the salesman and like, listen to this. Right. And as I turned like 4 or 5 years old, I was weird. I would show up at school and I would dress I don't know if you've seen the movie Big Daddy. I'm sure everyone has. And, they're like, you wear what you want to wear. And, my mom wasn't like that. She would like dress me up and all this stuff. And, she'd go into Macy's and all this. And I would pack Umbros and like a suit and tie and like bizarro clothing. And as soon as I got home or got to school, I would change into it. And kids probably thought I was weird. And I don't know. I think I had friends. I really don't know. And so in the summer times, my dad would be traveling and that was a great opportunity to take the family with. And there'd be different breaks that I was off or my mom was a teacher. So she could only take certain times of the year off. So I would travel with my dad and he would take me, not like a normal young kid with their, businessman father where they'd leave him somewhere. I don't know what they do. He brought me into the boardroom. So I'm like sitting in the room and sitting in the meetings with like his reps and his, his buyers and stuff. And I'm like listening to them do deals. And so when I would go to school, I was watching the movies that were on hotel cable. So I'm watching Arnold Schwarzenegger and Predator and Conan and the line. Like I didn't watch cartoons. I was watching Wall Street and Boiler Room and weird shit that kids didn't understand. And so I would sit there and I viewed myself as like a businessman. And I think, one, it was fun to be with my dad and hit like 30 of the 50 states by the time I'm 9. I met all these old guys. I spent so much time in the room with 50 and 60-year-olds and 45-year-olds talking business and talking shop. That became kind of my thing. And that's what I knew. And I didn't understand what kids were doing. And that whole thing kept, as I aged and went into high school and junior high school, college, it was the same thing. Like I was always 20 years ahead of the people I was with and what I was talking about. And at the time it was weird. In retrospect, I think my ability as a business person to understand deals and see things is because since I'm 5 years old, I've been listening to the nuances of why a person said yes or why a person said no and learned the values of. My dad was a relationship sales guy. He's not a guy who was like slinging product. He's a guy who would meet a person and do business for 25 years with them. And so I learned this value of you earn relationships, you earn respect, you sometimes win, sometimes lose. You go out of your way to make it up if you couldn't get it done this time, and people stay with you. And if you know what they're saying, what they want, you become pretty good at selling. But at the end of the day, to keep the relationship, you have to deliver. And so I sort of learned that. And of course, I used it for evil as a child because I would go into classrooms and negotiate. When I got to college, I was so disinterested. I went to Marquette, studied advertising because it seemed like the path of least resistance. I had an eye for design stuff. So like that was interesting. And I got, some recognition for that. But I would walk into the classroom. I have something of a photographic memory to a point. And so for me, I could ace exams like no problem. Like I would just assume I'm going to get 100% on the midterm and final and fuck everything else. And so I would go to the teacher the very first day, pass out the syllabus. I'd take a red pen. I'd mark off all the shit I'm not going to do. And he'd say, 10% off your grade if you don't attend a certain amount of classes. And I would negotiate. I'd walk up to him like, listen, you don't want to grade the paper. You don't want to do the essay. You don't want to have a person in the room who doesn't give a fuck. I will just get a 70 from you if I don't do anything. And if I get 100% on the midterm exam and the final, I will get an 85% based on your math. And at that point, you decide if you think that I'm an A student or if I'm a C student. Because I didn't put the time in, but I did do what I was here to do. And I literally went through all of my college like that. My mom would lose her shit because I had a scholarship and I would have a quarter where I was underneath what I needed and a quarter where I crushed it. And it would just be trying to stay on that like C level to keep my money. And she would call it negotiating time, meaning the 2 weeks before the midterm and final. It means I'm going to study for this test. I'm going to go and take it. And then I'm going to follow up and negotiate with the professor. And I did that my whole life. I did the same thing when I got my first job. Like I've just always used what I knew about people to sort of get what I wanted out of it. And then I think I wrote this in your questionnaire. It was when I got out of college and I got a real job and I left that thought process behind and I lost myself. And so ever since then, we're not doing that anymore. We're doing it how we do it. So it's kind of answered your question, but it all is relative. Like I grew up in a house where I was given a lot of responsibility and a lot of freedom, which I could ruin and be a bad kid, or I could use it for good. And I spent a lot of time with my dad traveling around, which I think made me a 40-year-old, 12-year-old.
That makes a lot of sense. Not the answer I was expecting.
I'm a shrink's dream. Like if you want to take this all the way, we can go to a shrink and they'll be like, what the fuck? This guy.
No, I think you, there's no question. Plenty of psychologists, psychiatrists could make hay with you over a long period of time.
Yeah.
But we don't have that much time. So we're just going to do it our way. You're a parent.
Yeah.
You know from your own experience as a child that kids are paying attention all the time.
Yeah.
Whether you as the parent know it or not. So when you do what you do now, are you conscious of the fact that your daughter's paying attention?
100%.
And where does that come out? How do you see it? Where do you recognize it?
Well, I recognize it in her face. She looks like me, fortunately or unfortunately. This is a product of some fighting with my wife because she comes from a more traditional background. She's a high school chemistry teacher. She, does things kind of under the letter of that sort of Bell system. And I had Vivian she was here for 9 months, maybe. I don't even know if she was 9 months old. And I brought her, actually, no, she wasn't. She was like 6 months old. And I brought her to WGN Radio where I was hosting a show. And I literally hosted an entire show holding her cradled in my arm. And she would just grab the mic in the middle of the show. And I just like turn it into like she is like in the fabric. I've done calls and stuff like this with people. And I just have her sitting in my lap and she's just watching right along. My wife has all these different things that she looks for, like rules. You don't say no, you give them options and whatever books and Instagram says. And I'd make her negotiate. This is a 15-month-old who can't even talk. She knows Dada and Boo-Ray and a few other things. And I make her think when she wants a snack, she wants something goofy. I make her think. I make her run around in it. And I think it's fascinating. And I see her do things, which again pisses my wife off because she sees me do it. My daughter already reverse engineers things, like where kids are learning to stand and they make sure that they fall on their face 50 times until they figure it out. Vivian like slides to where she's trying to go and then reverses her way back to the couch and then stands up. Like she thinks like that. And I part of it's innate, I think. And part of it's that like, I try to be deliberate when we're doing things. Cause I think once she actually is like, coherent and can talk and such, I want her to always think of things from a negotiating standpoint and understand that the world has walls and ceilings if you want it to. If you don't want you don't have to.
So when you go into a retail store, and you see the price, is that the price for you?
No.
Or is that like the start? Take us through this.
This is so funny. So the fact that you asked that question that exact way, it couldn't be more perfect. So as a young kid, I don't condone anything that I have to do this little like asterisk. I don't condone anything that this guy said and stands for, and it does not. History he's on the wrong side. But Andrew Dice Clay, in his heyday, is a comedian. Now he's had a little resurgence, but he was kind of a sad sack because he would use terrible language, not nice to women and races and all kinds of stuff.
All kinds of things.
But in his heyday, he would fill Madison Square Garden. He was funny as shit. And I had his album. And as I said, there's a photographic piece here where I would memorize entire albums. I could still do it. I could spit back every line in Predator, every line in Commando, Running Man, all of it. And he had a bit, and I don't know what this is, 993 or so. And I'm listening to it on the way to Washington, D.C. with my family. And we go shopping with my aunt. And I swear to God, it's a true story. There's a clip from Andrew Dice Clay's album where he goes, I walk into a Gap and I see this guy and he's selling me this shirt and it says bum on it and he wants $50. I'm like, take the fucking letters off and I'll pay you $12 for the shirt. I don't need the fucking bum on it. And I was so enamored with it that we went into a store and I'm like 10 and I walk up to the store clerk and I'm like, I want this sweater. And she's like, oh, it's 50 something, whatever, more money than I had. And I was like, well, then take the fucking letters off. And then she heard the whole place just like exploded. And I just got to realize there, I was like, I used to go to Subway and I'd be like, I'll tell you what, you charge $4 for a foot long veggie. I want tomato sauce from the meatball, but I don't want the meatballs. So it's still a veggie. So I would like haggle with them. And to me, like I try not, it's a waste of time to do it now because everything is Amazon and the prices are like whatever. But I definitely, in the days of like before Amazon where everything was just like point and click, I would absolutely go in. I used to do this at the card store. I would go to the card store. My mom would give me $50 and say like, this is what you got for the week. And I would be bartering with this guy. And then I'd go outside and I'd sell some pack of cards to some dumb kid for $5 more than I paid and then go back in and get another card. My parents had like every kid, you got chores and I'd get an allowance. I think it was like $20 to do the lawn. And I had a dumb friend who would do it for $15. So I was like, how about this? You come to my house, you use our stuff, $15. I'll give it to you, mow the lawn. I keep 20, give him 15. I got 5 and I do whatever the fuck I want. It's like, I was always doing stupid stuff like this.
I know the answer to the question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because I want to understand how it went down. Your allowance did not start at 20. Your parents offered you something else. I want to hear the conversation. Like how to get to 20.
Oh my God.
They're so, like, it's going to be $10. It's going to be $10, Scott. And then what happens?
Honestly, I think it was 20. I think my mom, so we had this thing where like, if I wanted something, like not a need, but like I want a pair of shoes, I had to pay for half. She would give me half and I had to come up with the other half. And so I think she knew when she did the math on what I was buying, that if she gave me 20, there wouldn't be a whole lot of haggling and I'd have to do something and it would kind of fit and I wouldn't throw a piss fest or something because I didn't get what I wanted. Like I think she kind of figured out like the numbers on it, but I'll tell you that it didn't stop at the lawn. Because in high school, I was a golfer and I played in the golf team and it was costing a lot of money. My parents were like, this is insane. You need to get a job at the links so the golf is free. So I got a job there. I fucking hated it. I was bussing tables and the people were just awful. And so I started paying another kid on the golf team to take my shift. So I basically say, you take my shift, you work it, you keep the money and I keep the tip money. And I would just go golf. So I would play golf all day long in practice and he would work my shifts, but he'd get to keep the money, but I got just enough money to pay what I needed. So I was always doing stuff like that. So like I really think like that's the part with the money where my mom kind of set the tone of like, listen, if you want something and you can get halfway there, then you know how to figure out how to get the rest of the way. And that kind of stuck with me.
So in these scenarios where you're with Jen and you start to haggle.
Oh my God.
What does she do?
She leaves. I've kind of made a deal with the devil. Like when I'm on my own and I'm representing us on my own, I do me. And when I'm in the room and she's there and it's like her people or her thing, I let her do whatever and I just sit back because otherwise it gets weird.
Totally get it. So we're going to move on from your parents, I promise, in a second. But when you're traveling with your dad and, you know, you're in the business person environment, clearly things rubbed off on you. Are you able to distill it down to 1, 2, or even 3 big takeaways that you took from that time that you use today?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So there's 3 people that I got to know a lot over the years. One was a couple, Lou and Darlene in Dallas, and we used to go visit them, and they had a suite at the Cowboy Stadium during the heyday when they were winning Super Bowls. So I got to sit in the boxes next to Jerry Jones. So I got to sit there, meet all these guys. There's a picture somewhere with Tony Dorsett, a Hall of Fame running back for the Cowboys, and he's holding me upside down with my shoes. And I swear to God, I said to him, my dad still tells this story. He told me what he was doing. I don't even remember the gist of it. And I told him, how do you not have more money? And I'm like 12 or 13. I was like, you should be doing endorsements. You should be sponsoring trucks and shit. Like, what are you doing? And he's laughing with Eugene Lockhart, who's a good friend of his. And literally, the next time I came to Dallas, like 2 years later, he was doing Toyota truck ads. And I laughed and was like, oh, I think he got that from me. He owes me some money. You know, and so like Lou and Darlene were very instrumental in me sort of understanding what it's like to entertain. Like what is the value of showing someone a really good time, like really showing them a good time. And then my other person is Jean-Paul Delahousie, whose family was out in New Orleans, and we spent a lot of time there. And that became our home away from home. And that is where you learned etiquette. And you don't dress for you dress for them. You don't take someone somewhere that you know you want to go. You take them somewhere where they want to go. What I learned, there's like 3 real pieces here. I learned that to be brutally honest and transparent and just be like, this is the fucking deal. Like in order for this to work, I need to take, 20% back, whatever the price is. And they go, it doesn't work for me. And I go, well, this is the deal. I got to do this one this time. If you make this work for me this time, I'll make it up to you on the next one. And then you do that. If you said you're going to do it, then you do it. And if you do that, they will always be there when you're a little bit desperate. So I learned that just be honest and tell them what you want, what you need, and how you'll get it back to them. And then the other part was that entertaining part. And entertaining means etiquette and it's empathy. It's understanding like this person could be anywhere with anyone spending their money on anything. And instead of you taking from them, you make sure you give. And if you do that and you do it regularly, there's going to be some people who take advantage of you. And over time, whatever, they'll do what they do. But for the most part, it will pay itself back. And I think if you live 20 years of traveling around with those kind of people with your dad or whatever you're doing, and you don't learn that, you're not paying attention. I don't know what you're doing.
So you bring up Tony Dorsett, who I loved at Pittsburgh, by the way.
33, Heisman.
But I freaking hate the Cowboys. So I'm not even going to go there with that.
They're getting crushed anyway, so whatever. You're good.
But other than to say, if you talk about athletes who got into business and were hugely successful in a big way,
how about them
Roger
Cowboys?
Staubach. How about them Cowboys?
Randy White had all the restaurants. Michael Irvin, Troy Aikman owned a bunch of shit. He's a property investor. Emmett Smith in the books and all this. I mean, it goes on.
Totally great.
Prime time.
Now we got to call Michael Irvin out in particular because he's a Hurricane.
Yes.
Right. And so everybody knows the U and the single greatest college football team ever.
Oh my God.
So shout out to them. The other thing, by the way, which you said early on in this conversation in your dress code for school, a brand I have not heard in forever, Umbros. I mean, talk about a throwback brand. Like
I still remember them, blue and white, my little blue and white shorts.
So I loved Umbros in part because, I was a soccer player. I played through college. I played as an adult, blah, blah, blah. But Umbros were the first sort of athletic brands that made it into mainstream.
Yep.
right? Like it was that first crossover brand. It was like in the 70s what Lululemon is today. Like originally it was.
Remember Lotto shoes? That became all the rage for a while after soccer guys.
Adidas Sambas. Yep. Like people think Sambas are new. Like Sambas are so old.
Yeah.
Right? So your favorite city is New Orleans. And I now have some understanding as to why. But you're the first person on the questionnaire to answer spicy preference with Thai hot, which is exactly how I answered that question, by the way. When and where did you know that you love spicy food? Because there's, I mean, you got to be willing to try, by the way. That's the first thing.
So they don't have a kids menu at Ruth's Chris. They don't have kids menu over, when you're out and about with my dad and these dinners. I didn't go home. It would be out in Dallas or we went to Hawaii a bunch of times, Florida, California. I wasn't like left in a hotel with like a housekeeper. I was out at the restaurant sitting at the table. These guys are pounding scotches. And my dad's like, the meal today is kimchi. I don't know what the fuck kimchi is, but I'm eating it. And that was it. And it's like, if you're exposed to that and if you spend time in New Orleans, it's Cajun, right? So like when you're 3 or 4 years old and you're eating crawdads that are seasoned in Cajun spices and you go back to home and it's PB&J and you're like, what the fuck? So, it was just like our house was like that. We just did, and we do that here. So like my daughter had Cajun salmon last night. Like that's what she like, I think it's whatever you're used to when you start with it. And if you have a taste for it in the beginning, it stays. And I think you lose, as you get older, you lose your taste buds. So it just has to get hotter and hotter.
So I agree with that, by the way. But the interesting thing about this, especially for someone who has a taste for interesting foods, whether it's spice or otherwise, when I ask him what his last meal is, he basically calls out the hamburger at McDonald's. Like, explain, please explain. Not that I love McDonald's, but why is that the last meal?
Because I don't want to think about it. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm about to get the needle or whatever. The last thing I want to be spending my time with is negotiating in my head what I want to eat on a menu. And like, this goes to another kind of point of this I think is valuable to people. I have a company right now that I'm involved in, and I met with some of the guys that we hired in team. And I sometimes forget because I spend a lot of time with guys like you on the phone with entrepreneurs and CEOs who are wired differently. And now we've got people who are not entrepreneurs and they're employee type people. And they're talking about their day. And the one guy says to me, he's very stylish, not in the fancy way, but in just sort of like he accessorizes. And he says to me, every day I've met with you, you wear the same fucking thing. I go, well, these are different jeans, different shoes, and different shirt. But you're right. It's a tailored shirt in 5 different colors. I have 3 different same jeans, literally the same jeans. I have 3 pairs of greats and they're just different colors. And I don't want to think about it. I know what today is, tomorrow, and the next day. I don't think about it. And he's like, what? That sounds boring. And I was like, it's not. I have a watch. You don't recognize that I pay myself by buying watches that I like when I did a deal done or something. That's how I celebrate. You don't notice maybe that I'm wearing a watch that to me has significance. But my objective since I kind of refound myself was I want to put what most people spend 70% of their time on, and I want to fit into 7. So when it comes to food, I eat the same thing. Every single restaurant I go to, I have like 3 variations depending on what kind of restaurant. If it's a chicken restaurant, here's this. If it's steak, it's that, whatever. So I've eliminated decision-making for 90% of 70% of what I do in the day. I don't even think about it. And so when you said lunch?
What's lunch?
If it's available, lunch is a BLT or I skip lunch. Like if I'm not going to have dinner and there's like a BLT available or it's like a salad or whatever, or Tavala, I've really gotten into. It's a company in Chicago and I have Tavalas delivered. That was my lunch for a while, last couple of years. Usually if I can, I try to eat something at breakfast that is going to work. And then when I'm fat, I'm grazing all day and eat dinner too. And when I'm actually in decent shape and kind of got my shit together, I usually have a good breakfast, nothing for lunch, and I eat an early dinner.
Are you in shape right now? Or are you fat?
I'm a disaster. I was good turning the corner in July. I was on a good little tear, and then I sort of found alcohol and started just not giving a shit again.
Why do we characterize it as good and bad? Why is it good or bad?
So socially, I don't judge, whatever. I don't care. If you're happy, do whatever. To me, I say good and bad because I know what an optimized version of myself looks like. I know how much more energy I have, and I know much better my outlook is, and I know much easier I solve problems when I'm healthier and when I'm not distracted with shit or I'm chucked down with McDonald's. And it's bad when I fall into that habit because I know it. And the only way out of it for me is I have to fast for a couple of days to like snap out of it.
So I'm going to use this as sort of a segue into regrets. And you claim to have too many to count.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's true, but I do want to go back to what happens after Marquette. Great basketball team, by the way.
Yeah, it was the Dwayne Wade years. So it was Final Four.
Even better. You know, the Heat had a great run. We can agree on that. Yep. Okay.
Jimmy Buckets. The coffee man.
Little unlucky at the end here, but great season. Looking forward to next season. But you leave Marquette and you take a job.
Yeah.
You're an employee. The only time you're not doing you.
Yeah.
By the way, it's not an unusual decision to take a job out of college.
That's what you think you're supposed to do.
What happened that made you realize this is not for you?
So set the stage.
And is it a regret?
So set the stage. I am finishing up Marquette. I'm pretty cocky. Every Halloween from childhood on up, I would say I dress in a suit and tie for Halloween, and they go, "What are you?" And I'd say successful. And I was just kind of an asshole that way. And I had a lot of swagger.
Successful.
Yeah. Life is good. And I had this swagger, and I would always be kind of in the room, and I could connect with people. When I was at Marquette, I used to shoot around with Steve Novak and all the guys in the basketball team. And I always found my way into this like limelight scenario. And my uncle, who in law, I guess, whatever you call it, was a very successful real estate person. And he called and said, "Hey, can you check on some properties I have in Wisconsin while you're there?" And I said, "Sure." And then next thing you know, he offers me a job. And this is through family, but to me, it's no different. I was certainly not given any preferential treatment. I was thrown into the fire and basically told to fuck off. And I quickly just started doing what I'm supposed to do. Learn, be successful at the job, but like learn my role and follow my rules. And I learned pretty quickly that I'm an unhireable person after this. But, while I was doing that, I felt like I was getting pushed back in a corner, and that like kind of swagger I had was getting beaten out of me. And my being out in front of people was less and less. It was not valued. I was put in a corner and given charts to follow and leases to read. And I would negotiate. I'd have these like little moments that things were okay, where I'd get on the phone with people from Office Depot and all these other major tenants, and I would kick the shit out of them in a lease, and they'd find out I'm 25 and be like, "Don't tell anybody." And that was how I got to have swagger. And then I started a blog called the, what did I call it? The Unsung Majority. And I ended up getting like, never had my name on. I think I called myself Larry Dickman, which was a name that Clint Eastwood and Don Rickles used to use when they checked into hotels. And I would write these fucking absurd, like basically I'd have a conversation at work, and then I would just shred the person in a blog. And the same thing when I was out and about, I'd meet people, go on dates, whatever, and be like, "Oh my God, the friend zone." I write this whole blog about fucking friend zone. And I got like 10,000 followers and readers in this, and I had no idea. This is like 2006. And that was the only way I could showcase myself. And as time wore on, I got more beaten down, and I started getting kind of what I felt ripped off, driving a lot of revenue and opportunities for the business and not compensated. And be like, "Oh, well, we're in a recession. It's part of the whole." It's like, well, I drove a shit ton of business and no one else did. So why am I fucking doing this?
Right.
and I felt like I was in a rut, and I was miserable. I didn't go out anymore. I didn't hang out with my friends. I completely went inclusive. And I felt because I wasn't me. I didn't have any rights to me. I didn't have any say in anything. I didn't have any ability to showcase anything. And I was just rotting. And so that was sort of the 2010. I finally talked myself into enough courage. And I was like, you know what? One day I wrote this letter, the resignation. I said, one day I'm just going to walk in and sit on his fucking desk and that's it. And I didn't tell my mom, which caused a rift in the family because she didn't tell her sister because she didn't know. And I just did it. I was like, fuck it, I'm out of here. I'm going to go to law school or something and figure it out. And I didn't do that, but like I ended up going to grad school. And I think I left just trying to stop the terror. You know, it wasn't like I had a plan. I just wanted to stop.
So you negotiate your way through college.
Yeah.
Literally not going to class.
Yeah.
The job thing, not for you. So you decide to go to grad school. There had to be some thinking there. What were you thinking?
Honestly, I had a good friend who went to law school and a bunch of other people were doing the same thing. And it seemed like a place you could put your life on pause. And I felt like I needed to find myself and figure out what the hell. And, you know,
did you finish?
Yeah. I ended up getting 2 master's degrees. I think they're.
Oh, look,
sitting right behind me.
Look at that. Wait, what are they in?
So one's in media management and the other was in entrepreneurship. So,
nice.
And this is honest to God truth. Northwestern actually Medill built a graduate program around my curriculum. I built my own curriculum because I went there and they were like, what the fuck? And I was taking classes in the law school and in the media school and the business school. And they started a new program called a master's degree in media innovation and entrepreneurship. And they literally just said, you know, I almost got kicked out. Like the director for Medill did not like me and did not like anything I was doing. The kids didn't really understand what I was doing. I was using class time to come up with a company I was going to try to start. And, you know, it just was weird. And so ultimately I had to like con them into letting me take the classes at Kellogg and switch into that program. And at the end of it, I left with a lot, but I had to fight like hell to get there. And they ended up having me come back a lot of times and talk, and they ended up building a whole program around it.
How fun is it to go back and talk?
It's amazing. It's like, it's the same thing as like if you left a company on semi-bad terms and then you have massive success and they want you to come back to give a pep talk and you're like, fuck yeah, I can't wait to come back in this place.
We had a woman named Jenny Lefcourt on the show who's a VC with Freestyle. And she left Stanford Business School after her first year to start a company. And when she left, Stanford said, you can't come back.
Yep.
Because if you want to come back, then you failed and we don't like failures, which is like, Stanford doesn't talk like that anymore, by the way.
Yeah,
they're like, go fail and then come back.
Yeah.
You know, but that was sort of the same thing because now she goes back and she talks to these classes.
Yep. You know, a lot of things are about timing. I'm a weird example in history because when I was at Northwestern, one of the very first capstone type class that came my way was this group project for a company called Big Frame that got acquired by YouTube. And it was Mr. Guitar Man. And he was essentially the very first influencer ever on YouTube ever. And we were tasked to try to help expand from US to South America and pick whatever other market he should go to. And I fell in love with it immediately. And I went back to my Medill classes thinking, I'm going to be a hero. I'm going to tell all these guys like, look, there's something new coming. You guys need to be aware of it. And that was not how it was received. It was like, fuck you, get out of here. You're a criminal. And so when I left and ultimately with the Technori and all this stuff, it paved a way where they started having me come back and talk to their journalists about how do you create your own, you know, channel? How do you survive in this world? I don't mean this in like a get back at you, but like, it's hard not to have the chip because these are the same people who made life a living hell for me for a year and a half. And they basically tried to fail me. They would not give me credit for the stories I was writing because they'd say it's too much of your opinion. And I would say I spent 4 years in commercial real estate and I'm covering real estate right now. It's not my fucking opinion. It's a fact because this is what I know. It made it really hard. And then for them to call me and be like, hey, what's up? How you doing? Come on back and talk to the kids. And I'm like, you know, I'm going to shit on Medill, right? And like, maybe don't do that so much. You know, and then eventually the kids love it and you have them intern for you and they're all happy and, you know, everything moves on and it rights the ship. But like, it wasn't easy. And I felt even worse there because like I left this job to get a restart and get a fresh start. And everyone's telling me, what are you doing? Like, you don't fit in here. So now I'm like even worse almost in a lot of ways. But I think I needed to get pushed to that end where I was just like, well, fuck all of you. I'm doing this, which goes to your point in the beginning of this. Like, do you really regret it?
So to a certain degree, like you have an ability to see around a corner that not everybody has that. So given your past experience, do you run up against situations, scenarios today where you're seeing around the corner again, someone you're talking to doesn't get it, and yet you need them to, but to say you just don't get it isn't going to get you what you want? So what do you do today as opposed to what you maybe did, back at business school?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we're talking about alternative IRAs and we're talking about crowdfunding. And that's something that people go, I don't get it. The old version of me would try to pound it through and say, you're fucking stupid and whatever. And it wouldn't work out for me. And I will still say to this day, like, you can't convince some people. Like some people are just, they're obtuse and they're not going to change. And you just got to keep moving on and leave them behind. And if they ever become an asset, don't burn a bridge, just sort of, wound it. Slow it, shoot it in the knee so it's slow and you can tackle it easier. For me, what I've learned is patience too much almost, where I break it down, talk about seeing around a corner. I'm dealing with this right now. Like I could give you 5 stories that I can't give you because if you played it, people would know who I'm talking about. I got over this. Like I'm going to make it a vendetta. I'm going to fucking get you. Now I look at it like, what do I need to be successful? Like, what do I need? Do I need to convince them of everything, like the whole truth, or can I convince them of just a little bit? And if I can convince them just a little bit and they just give a little bit and they make a couple little moves that let me stay in the game, then maybe it's not today. Maybe it's a year from now. They're like, hey, did you know this? I'm like, yeah, I fucking told you that a year ago. But they see it now. And really, what was the point? Was it to win? Was it to win the ego? Or was it to just get to where you need to go? And so for me, I'm no longer in this game where I'm trying to fight and like, people are copying me. There's a quote from one of my shows that I did with John Chambers, the chairman of Cisco. And I asked him how do you look at competitors? How does Cisco exist? There's a gazillion things that could be knocked off. And he goes, never did give a shit about the competition much. Only cared about the customer. I only asked the customer questions. And if I could be better than my competition at delivering to them, I'm going to win every single time. So I don't care about competitors. And I took the same approach. Like every single thing I did, I was like, I don't give a shit what other people are doing. I just know what I'm doing, what you're doing, and how I can help you. And if I can just get you around the corner now, maybe I can get you on the straightaway later. And my belief is still to this day, contracts and paperwork is only useful when you're broke. Because if you have money, they don't mean shit. And if I can get you to agree to stay in the game with me and then I can win longer and I start making money, you're going to jump on because you can't say no.
So let's talk about crowdfunding. But I want to talk about it in the context of Technori and you.
Okay.
Because you started back in 2016?
The crowdfunding stuff, we partnered with Candidate Republic before they launched live in 16. Technori's been going since 2010.
Oh, I didn't realize Technori itself had been going that long.
Yeah.
Wow. Congratulations.
It's been a lot of things. It's been a blog. It's been an event series that was the largest in the nation for a minute. It's been a lot of things.
Yeah. So then forget crowdfunding for right now. Take us through what it's taken to get Technori to this point. Walk us through the ups and downs, and you're safe in doing so because here you are.
Yeah.
10 years later.
So Technori was founded originally by Seth Kravitz and a bunch of entrepreneurs with the purpose of trying to build a tech community in Chicago when there wasn't one. And, I had the luxury of going to some events early on, which these are like meetups, right? This is like coffee and beer. There's nothing. And he starts launching a blog and I'm going to events and stuff. And at the time it's starting to roll and you're starting to get, 3, 4, 5, 600 people at a monthly event. It becomes, kind of the largest literally in the country and 7 cities and all that stuff. And I had started my podcast at WGN, and that's after the business that I had started out of grad school. And it was the same thing. I always looked at it, I think Seth always looked at it as like the distant cousin. It was a podcast while no one did podcasts, but I did. And he had events and that's what it was. And we would kind of kick things back and forth. You'd swear it was the same thing. So I ultimately made a move to acquire Technori outright from him and take care of the investors that he had sunken in that and use my podcast to do that. And my vision was 2 things. One, I don't like events, so I need to keep it going. But like this needs to be turned into something digital because you can't impact millions. You can only get a couple hundred people in a room, and there's word of mouth. But if you don't want to have TEDx, which I'm not that guy, you need to go digital. So I started basically breaking the event experience into digital components, like little videos for social media, and the podcast is sort of the long one, and the pitches were pitch videos and so forth. Which was the equivalent of the event, which was a keynote speaker, 5 startups that pitch for 5 minutes. And the audience were usually angel investors who could actually invest in the companies or wanted to join the startup, whatever. Then I started looking, I was like, well, as Chicago as a city starts to grow and 1871 pops up, they weren't there when we started this, and 80 something incubators later, what's the purpose of going to Technori events? Like, why do you go to that if you can just go to any incubator and get whatever it is you're looking for? We need to have a better call to action. So I was going to start my own crowdfunding platform on it. And I was talking to Chicago investors about raising a little bit of money. And I talked to Ken Wynn from Republic, and he had, 12 million or something earmarked, and I had like 2. And I just knew like Chicago didn't have the appetite and the money and the balls to do this. And he knew everything I didn't know. And I said, I'm not.
Oh, he's a smart dude.
Oh yeah. I said to Ken, I'm like, I have no chance in this. So I'd rather just join you. And we created a partnership that was not money. It was just like, hey, I'll do good for you. You do good for me. So we promoted all of the companies that he had, which were not a lot at the time. And, the very first company, Youngry, I think was the first one. And we had Ash Kumar on, and he raised, 25,000 or something. It wasn't a lot, but it was then. And he started promoting Technori, and I started telling companies they should go to Republic to raise money instead of begging from angels. And, here we are 4 years later, and we're still partners. And we still basically, I decided that the call to action for Technori at the time, let's go back 3 years, at that time, the call to action was for founders. So go pitch on my show, and the investor community and all the people there can invest in your company. So the reason you would go on the show is to raise money. And the reason you'd listen to the show is to participate and support startups. Now, fast forward 2-3 years, and now you've got cryptocurrency went through the roof in 17, comes back down, Robinhood, COVID. Everybody is now into self-directed investing. Alto IRA, Rock Dollar, there's a bunch of them. And I basically said, I'm going to be the guy that is going to vet startups, and I'm going to, we had the opportunity to raise a fund, and we ultimately didn't do it. And that had nothing to do with this. It was just didn't work out. And I went back to it and I was like, would I do that again? No, I would just do equity crowdfunding. I'm going to teach retail investors that they can get the same kind of deals as angels and have all the options and all the controls. And they could use their IRA to do it. They could do a lot of things. We talk about that on my show. I'm just going to become that guy. I'm the guy who reps crowdfunding as a retail investor. I am a guy who took out a credit card for $65,000 because every rich asshole said, fuck off. And now I'm investing in companies just like everyone else. I have 5 exits, just like all the guys who invested the big money. And I'm the guy I'm the regular person putting their own real money in it.
So one of the hardest things for people to do is to get started. They don't want to make a mistake.
Yeah.
And I think you fill an incredibly important role in the ecosystem from an education standpoint. So what do you say to all the people that listen to you about their own diligence process and the things they should be thinking about when they're thinking about making an investment in a company?
Well, I would tell you, if you've never invested before, so it's not about math for you, if you're kind of novice at it, don't invest in things you don't understand. You won't know how you won, and you won't know why you lost, and you'll learn nothing. So don't invest in stuff you don't understand. Stick to the stuff that you know. And then I would say, and this is just me personally, I was just talking about this with my mother this morning. We just bought a house, and I want to always have I think 9 months it takes me to get out of a rut pretty much. So I need 9 months of mortgage to feel like I can take some risks. So 30 grand, whatever it is that I have sitting there, I need to have 50 or 60 grand before I can invest again. Because if I can lose everything I put in play, I won't lose everything. I'll probably lose half, which leaves me back at 30, so I'm safe. If you can't take the money and light it on fire, you're going to make shitty deals, because you're going to make deals nervous. Just like when you gamble and your buddy says you bet 10-1, you have to get odds. That's the same mental premise. So don't invest money that you cannot burn, because if you've already lost it and you look at it that way, you can only win. So I make decisions on investments based on the probability of winning and what I think the outcome should be and whether it's worth the amount of money I'm going to put in it. And I just know that if I'm wrong, I'm losing it, but I already lost it. So whatever. And that way I don't let the fear of risk or failure alter my thought process. I don't let someone going, well, what happens if this goes down and it's a bad deal? It's like, well, fuck it. It was a bad deal.
That's interesting because what I say to people, especially for people who think about investing with me, essentially is if you can't lose it, don't use it.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
You know, what's next? What's next for Technori? How do you continue to evolve the business, grow the business, and how do you stay excited?
I move the brand with me like a badge. I just change it. I don't worry about it. Like, oh, people are like, oh, that's not what Technori used to be. When we first shifted to digital, I had a bunch of people comment on our Facebook page, like, this isn't what it used to be. And this is all fucking clickbait and whatever. And was like, dude, unlike us, like, get the fuck out of here. I don't need this. It is as long as it serves the people who are getting something out of it, including me. Like, I don't want to do something I don't like. If it's not valuable to you, then move on. It's okay. Like, we had a strong 20-something thousand following when we took over digital. Now we're 75 or 80,000 weekly subscriber type. And I bet 10 of the 20 are gone. I bet they're not even there anymore because they thought this isn't what I signed up for. And that's fine. That's okay. And it doesn't have to be Technori. Someday I could sell this off and it'd be done. And I'd start a Scott Kitun show or whatever it is. I just do what I want to do that I think is going to be interesting and people are going to like, and I'll find fun. So when I look at like what the future is for me, I'm already in it. Technori spent the first 5 years talking to companies that were two dudes in a laptop and they didn't have any money and they didn't have anything and most of them shit out. And then we kind of got to a point where we had Spot Hero and a few that like actually succeeded, and Grubhub and others. And so we elevated to starting to talk to the founders who have had some success and some exits. We start talking about exits instead of seed money. And then we start talking about, founders raising capital, equity crowdfunding, and modern friends and family, if you will. Which, by the way, all the investors that I talked to in Chicago were friends of mine, were like, that's the stupidest fucking idea. And I said, I heard that before. So tell me it means it's a good idea. So I go forward with it. And then we evolved from there to where, like, you can only say we had $300 million raised in companies on our stage or whatever. Like, the number's so big that it doesn't even matter anymore. So then I turn our attention to the investors, which there's at least a couple of years of educating investors, retail investors, about the benefits of investing in startups. And honestly, the conversation I had with you was super valuable because it's the nuances. It's not just the startups. It's not just the idea of investing in startups. It's the nuances of tax deferment, of making income for 10 years from now where you make 80% interest rate instead of 2% because you did it in something that has a rocket propeller growth trajectory. So I have a lot of interest in that. And then personally, Technori has been a huge deal engine for me. I use it to find and source companies that I invest in, acquire and start and do. And so I've got like one company right now, Songfinch, which to me is like a cameo of music in a lot of ways. They pitched on stage in 2017, June 17, with Cameo, ironically, when Cameo launched their app. And I reached out to them 3 years later and invested in them, and now raising a round for them and getting involved on a daily basis with them because of what I've learned. And so what I think the future is for me is I want to keep doing the show. And if we get to a point where now we're talking about angel investing, Reg D investments, so accredited investments for this, like, we'll evolve however the market evolves. And personally, I'm just going to keep piling in to deals that I can make an exit without a lot of money up front. And once I have accumulated enough wealth, I don't have to go call investors to put the first money in and dilute the shit out of my stake. The next time I do this, if I do it right, I think I probably have 1 or 2 more deals I need to get done well before I can front my own money. I'm hoping in like 2 years, I would say like 42. I hope by the time I'm 36. I hope by the time I get to 42, I'm calling investors for a Series A, not for the front money. And it's just me kind of jumping into it and talking about it, doing a show where I talk about how I did that.
Hey, Scott, I just want to thank you for coming on the show and being real and just having an absolute great conversation with us for an hour. I think people are going to love it. And I appreciate just how straightforward you are about it all. I think it's unbelievably refreshing. So thank you for doing it with us.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the invite. And I hope people listen to the show we did with you, because I honestly learned a ton about IRAs and using it to invest in startups. I learned a ton about it, and I think a lot of people would benefit.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The Altogether Show is brought to you by Alto IRA. Alto knows that the public markets offer insufficient diversification of retirement accounts. That's why Alto developed a streamlined platform to make it easy and cost-effective for anyone to invest their tax-advantaged retirement savings in alternatives. Assets like real estate, VC, and crypto that are outside of the public markets and available through Alto's 21 platform partners. To learn more, visit altoira.com.